There's very little damage, but some shaken up residents after a moderate earthquake sent the ground rumbling in Kansas and Oklahoma. The U.S. Geological Survey says the quake's magnitude was 4.8. It was centered near the town of Anthony, about 25 miles southwest of Wichita, on Wednesday.
I'm standing here talking to a customer, and all the bottles started shaking.
This was more serious as far as our earthquakes are concerned, is that all of a sudden all the doors started to open, and they went on opening, and then the books started to come off the shelves.
Never felt anything like that's kind of crazy being here. And so far from everything.
Kansas has felt a surge in earthquake activity over the past year. This quake was the largest during that time. Sandy Kozel, The Associated Press.
A preliminary 7.3 magnitude earthquake struck just about 35 kilometers underwater, as you just mentioned, and that is just off the coast of Indonesia. But I want to make it perfectly clear, there's no longer a tsunami threat with this particular earthquake that occurred about an hour and 45 minutes ago. I've been checking all social media avenues, and nothing's been reported. The USGS has also cleared the tsunami threat. But with quakes of this kind of a magnitude, a Pacific-wide tsunami threat doesn't typically occur, but of course we do feel the effects locally about 200 to 300 kilometers around the epicenter. You can see Indonesia and Papua New Guinea within this area. This is the specifics of the earthquake that took place, again, about an hour and 45 minutes ago. Preliminary 7.3, 35 kilometers deep underwater, and just off the northwestern sections of Kota Ternate.
On the ground in Kobani near the Turkish border, ISIS fighters trade fire with Syrian Kurds as the U.S. and other countries unleashed 35 airstrikes against the terror group in the last 3 days between Syria and Iraq. CNN is told intelligence estimates suggest ISIS, also known as ISIL, is showing signs of stress from the onslaught. Maybe one reason the terror network is cooperating with al-Qaeda-linked al-Nusra Front.
ISIL has to continue to advance to succeed. It has to maintain momentum, and we've begun to break that momentum.
But the ISIS leader taunting the coalition as a failure. In a purported audio message, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi called the coalition, quote, terrified, weak, and powerless, threatening volcanoes of jihad everywhere.
It should come as no surprise that an organization like ISIL would be putting out this type of threatening rhetoric that's conveying and calling for more brutality.
The campaign got a boost today as Iraqi forces drove ISIS from the strategic town of Baji, ending their month-long siege on the country's largest oil refinery. Government control of Baji could be a turning point, choking off ISIS supply lines to its stronghold in Tikrit. To capture all the territory it lost to ISIS, the president's top military advisor said Iraq will need 80,000 troops. And the Joint Chiefs Chairman said additional U.S. advisors will be needed for complex missions expected in Mosul and to secure the Syrian border.
I'm not predicting at this point that I would recommend that those forces in Mosul and along the border would need to be accompanied by U.S. forces, but we're certainly considering it.
For just the third time, the U.S. went after the al-Qaeda-linked Khorasan group, believed to be the biggest threat to the U.S., hitting them near Aleppo.
A convoy of heavily armed Russian warships is powering towards Australia this morning ahead of President Vladimir Putin's arrival for the G20. Our 7 News Canberra Bureau broke this story last night. We go there now to reporter Amelia Brace. Amelia, what message is the Russian president trying to send?
Well, it's certainly a blunt message, Anne, and this is seen as an act of defiance directed not just at Australia but towards the West. And it's also a reminder that Russia's still a big player when it comes to global affairs. But locally, of course, the focus is on those warships, which are considered a response to the Prime Minister's shirt-front threat against Vladimir Putin. This morning, the fleet is sitting in the Coral Sea just outside Australian waters. Now, our Navy has been monitoring its movements for about a week and has now sent 2 frigates to shadow the vessels. Defence says there's no concern while they stay in international waters, but the big question is whether the Russians will seek port access. They'd have to give 48 hours notice, and Australia would then consider whether to approve or deny access to our waters, potentially sparking a diplomatic standoff.
We see the Russians going back to an earlier era of really Cold War hostility rather than looking to the future, which is increasingly one of international trade and countries operating across boundaries. So I think it's actually a public relations problem for President Putin.
It's really about politics within Russia. It's about President Putin making a statement back home.
And we're expecting to hear from the Prime Minister later today. He's in Myanmar at the East Asia Summit, where interestingly he's discussing maritime security.
And Amelia, there was a major agreement on climate change at APEC.
And this is an historic agreement between the US and China, where they're both committing to ambitious reductions in carbon emissions. These are the two biggest emitters in the world, and they'll also both be present at the G20, where global warming, of course, isn't on the agenda.
Australia is now left totally on the sidelines here, looking like we are just a quarry as the rest of the world moves on, and that is really the damage that Tony Abbott is inflicting.
And Environment Minister Greg Hunt says Australia is already delivering on its own commitment.
The wintry weather that's been plaguing much of the nation into a deep freeze made a loud, fierce arrival in the eastern U.S. Up to a foot of snow slammed northeastern Ohio by late Thursday.
It's like pretty heavy when you get to the bottom.
Areas around Lake Erie could get another 2 to 4 inches of snow by morning, while temperatures are expected to be in the 20s. The weather backed up traffic for hours along Interstate 90 as vehicles got stuck or slid off the road.
It's so bad on the interstate. There's traffic for miles. It took me an hour and a half to get home from downtown.
Record snowfall created havoc on the roads for drivers in northern Indiana. South Bend got more than 6 inches of snow by 1 p.m. on Thursday, setting a new daily record for that city. Driving was especially difficult on the Indiana Toll Road. State troopers reported scattered slide-offs and spin-offs. A separate weather system brought the season's first snowfall to New York City and New Jersey, whether residents were ready or not.
I won't wear a jacket till December 1st.
On principle?
Yes.
It's absolutely ridiculous. It's not even winter yet. I don't know why it's snowing.
Temperatures are forecast to remain extremely chilly for much of the nation's midsection, hovering from 20 to 40 degrees below normal in the high plains and the Mississippi Valley. Sandy Kozel, The Associated Press.
Good evening. A bushfire emergency has been declared in the lower Blue Mountains, where the towns of Warramoo and Blaxland are under threat from fire fronts and ember attacks. Now, here's how it looks right now from the 7 News helicopter. Aerial water bombing is underway and dozens of rural fire crews are on the ground. In one street, residents have been warned to leave their houses, while earlier 2 schools took emergency action to protect their young students.
As temperatures soared and winds hit 50 k's an hour, this is what they'd feared, an out-of-control bushfire. The wall of flames sprang up in the early afternoon, seemingly from nowhere. The choppers were ready, The noise alerting parents who race to Warrimoo Public School.
Yeah, it's a bit stressful and a bit emotional.
But with the flames raging, extra fire crews were ordered in and the decision was made to get a bus to the school to move the children who were starting to get frightened.
And it was upset because all me and my friends kept crying.
By now the blaze was starting to move. Embers carried by hot winds were pushing the fire front from Warrimoo towards Blacksland.
I've heard 278 to all stations. We've identified a fire ground. It's immediately to the north of the fire by about 2 miles.
On the ground they were waiting and organising. They've known for some time today was going to be full of danger. The forecast was right, but there's no predicting how bad it will get.
If it gets across the creek, it's going to potentially give us some problems.
The fire was upgraded to emergency level and the order given to evacuate local residents and Blacksland Public School. As the fire trucks rolled onto the school grounds, parents and children quickly left. Buses were brought in to make sure everyone got out.
Were you scared, you like?
It's now believed the fire might have been sparked by a common cause: power lines.
When we arrived, we found a large area bush alight under high tension power lines.
Because the fire's in such difficult terrain, water bombing is the best option.
Humidity, winds 4 kilometres, gusting to 7.
And while a cool change is on the way, there are fears it will bring new dangers. Well, Mel, the fire has now grown to 90 hectares in size, and I can tell you there are now 200 firefighters here on the ground. There are also dozens of crews from the Rural Fire Service. They have set themselves up on the south side of the Great Western Highway, and they are behind homes like the crew that you can see behind me. They're ready to protect those homes in case the fire changes direction. Everyone who's had to evacuate their homes, Mel, has already done so, but I can tell you there are many, many people that we have spoken to that have stayed behind and are willing to protect their homes if the fire direction does change. So between the firefighters, the water bombing helicopters, the air cranes and the local residents, well, everyone is doing everything they can to control this blaze. But Mel, the real fear will be if that wind direction changes.
Absolutely. All right, Sam, thanks so much. We'll come back to you in a little bit from now. The danger tonight remains in the Warrimoo area where the blaze started and in neighbouring Blacksland where residents around Baden Place were earlier warned to leave. Rural Fire Service Deputy Commissioner Rob Rogers is with us. And Rob, where are we at right now?
Good evening, Mel. Well, look, the situation as we speak is that fire has slowed down intensity a little bit. The wind has died down, but it is still approaching properties in Blacksland. Firefighters from RFS and Fire Rescue have done a great job this afternoon. There's been a lot of spot fires in people's yard and even over the highway that they've quickly suppressed. So they've done some great work and they're still there in those residences. We'll be there for several hours tonight. I can also advise you that the Great Western Highway and the train line will be reopened imminently to try and get some of that traffic congestion through, because there's a lot of people trying to get home. So police will be slowing the speed down, but obviously it is lucky that that road will be reopened. But as you spoke about, the real danger will be later on tonight when that southerly change comes through with winds gusting up to 50 kilometres an hour, pushing that fire back towards the Warrimoo area.
Yeah, Rob, it seems to have come out of nowhere. Were you surprised by its size and speed?
Well, look, we did see it originally start, and it was fairly small in size, but it's in totally inaccessible area, and our only choice with that fire was water bombing. So I guess that's the difficulty. When you can't get firefighters to the fire, it will grow like that, and so we've been quite frustrated with not being able to get to the actual fire. So I think that's unfortunately the circumstance. As far as fire starting, it is fire season, and unfortunately the poor people in the Blue Mountains have really copped it over the last couple of years.
In Guerrero, they're known for some of the most explosive demonstrations.
The fire department has just arrived, but guess what? Not only are the cars burning, but the inside of the building is also burning.
All this in support of the search for 43 missing students. Lunging at police. A CNN camera catches protesters taking an officer captive during a tug-of-war over a bridge. He was later released. The protesters are members of a teachers' union from all over the southern Mexican state of Guerrero. When night falls, a stark contrast.
Se mantenga así como hemos venido.
Soft-spoken people enjoying time with friends and family. The protesters granted CNN rare access inside their tent city in the main square of Guerrero's capital. They shut down City Hall and moved in days after the 43 students went missing. It's been more than a month.
How many teachers are there?
Una estimación de 5,000.
5,000?
The announcement more than a week ago by Mexico's Attorney General that 3 drug gang members confessed to killing the students only made the protesters more angry. To date, no DNA evidence has been presented.
He says that they feel the pain that the parents of these missing students are feeling.
Little sleep happens here. Teachers take turns guarding their makeshift homes at night and protesting during the day.
He says, I was asking him about the charred cars, the charred buildings, if we are to expect more of the same. And he says that yes, that they're ready to do more of the same.
Everyone in the tent city has a home, a family, a job. And even though the basics of living are rough here,
she says that there's public showers where they're able to pay 20 pesos and they can take a shower.
They don't plan to go anywhere until the students are found, even raising their own flag in the city square.
He says that the flag is a symbol of their fight.
Don't mistake their kindness in the camp for weakness on the streets.
Protesters taking it to a whole other level.
They vow to make the government listen to their demands. Rosa Flores, CNN, Chilpancingo, Mexico.